My name is Coraline Muir, and at 71, I've learned that the quietest mornings often carry the heaviest weight. The phone buzzed just after sunrise, its vibration cutting through the sound of rain against the tin gutter outside my Asheville home. The voice on the other end, crisp, professional, confirmed my travel itinerary to Austin. "Congratulations, Mrs. Muir," the woman said. "We'll see you tomorrow for the signing, $33 million. Even saying it in my head felt strange. I'd spent decades working as a hydrologist for the Tennessee Valley Authority, forecasting floods, measuring risk. Never once did I imagine that the land my late husband and I bought 40 years ago, a patch of rough Carolina soil, would become the site of a solar lease worth that kind of money. I hung up and stood by the window, watching the mist lift from the Blue Ridge slopes. Pride bloomed in my chest. But it didn't come alone. Guilt sat beside it, familiar, quiet, stubborn. The door creaked, and my daughter stepped in. Tamsin had my husband's green eyes, but none of his calm. She'd been staying with me these past few months between jobs. Though I'd stopped asking which job she was between, her hair was pulled back in a loose knot, her face pale. "Want me to help you pack?" she asked. "That'd be nice," I said. We worked in silence. She folded my linen shirts, one sleeve trembling as she smoothed the fabric. I caught the motion, the quick swallow in her throat. When I turned to fetch my toiletry bag, I heard the faintest rustle, a soft slide, like paper brushing against fabric. By the time I looked back, Tamsin was zipping the outer pocket of my suitcase. She smiled too fast. "I'll make coffee," she said, leaving before I could answer. The room seemed to shrink around me. I stared at the corner of the suitcase where her hand had been, my pulse ticking in my wrists. For a long moment, I did nothing. Then I placed my hand on the zipper, just to feel the cold metal under my palm. Rain kept tapping against the window. The sound filled the room as I slowly unzipped the case. The zipper came undone with a faint rasp, and the smell of cedar rose from the suitcase. I had lined it with sachets years ago, the way I used to line Tamsin's dresser drawers when she was a child. It was supposed to make things feel safe. Inside, my folded clothes were still neat shirts pressed, travel papers clipped, but there, in the corner beneath the linen blouse, sat a small white bundle. It wasn't much larger than a deck of cards, wrapped too tightly, the folds too precise. My breath shortened. I touched it with 2 fingers. Whatever was inside had weight, like sand. When I unwrapped it, I saw things my mind refused to fit together: a plastic pouch filled with fine white powder, a roll of bills bound with a rubber band, and an identification card with Tamsin's photo. But the name printed below was someone else's. The room tilted. I pressed a hand to the dresser to steady myself. I'd handled evidence before: photographs of ruptured levees, documents that could make or break federal projects, but never something that could ruin my own blood. If airport security found this, it wouldn't matter that I was innocent. One search, one test, and my life's work would dissolve faster than that powder could in water. My name, my husband's memory, the contract, they'd all vanish. My hands shook. Then the old habits took over, the ones trained for containment, for preventing disaster before it spread. I went to the kitchen, pulled on a pair of yellow dish gloves, and came back. With the same precision I once used to seal sample bags, I lifted the bundle, slid it into the hidden pocket of Tamsin's beige purse on the hall bench, and zipped it shut. The purse felt heavier than it should. I wiped the suitcase lining with a damp cloth. Then with another. No trace. No evidence. It wasn't betrayal, I told myself. It was correction. Returning a mistake to its owner. She would explain it, clear it up, or hide it better. I didn't care which. I only needed my trip to go as planned. The suitcase stood open beside me, silent, obedient. I shut it. The sound of the zipper closing felt final, like a lock sealing on something I would never again be able to undo. The rain had slowed to a mist, and I was halfway through folding my travel documents when the doorbell rang. 3 short chimes, steady and official. Through the window, I saw 2 uniformed officers on the porch, their cruiser idling by the curb, red and blue lights soft against the wet pavement. I opened the door with a smile that felt borrowed. "Morning," I said, my voice thinner than I intended. "Mrs. Muir." The older officer tipped his cap. "Sorry to bother you, ma'am. We received a call about suspicious activity earlier this morning, delivery and exchange, possibly narcotics. Your address came up on a ring alert from your neighbor's camera. Mind if we step in for a quick check?" I froze. The world seemed to press inward, shrinking around his words. Behind me, the house smelled faintly of lemon polish and damp fabric. My suitcase stood by the wall, zipped and gleaming. Before I could answer, the younger officer stepped forward, holding a leash. The dog, a golden retriever mix with a patch of rain-darkened fur, sniffed the air, then padded past me into the hall. His nose twitched once, twice, before turning toward the bench. Tamsin's beige purse sat there, exactly where I'd left it. The dog barked a single sharp sound that made my stomach drop. "What's in that bag?" ma'am, the officer asked. I didn't move. I couldn't. The air felt heavy, metallic. The officer lifted the purse, unzipped it, and pulled out the white-wrapped bundle. The moment I saw it, I knew every rationalization I'd built was gone. Tamsin appeared at the top of the stairs, her hair loose, eyes wide. "What's going on?" The older officer read her name, then looked up. "Miss Muir, we need to ask you a few questions." Her gaze darted from the purse to me, then back again. "No," she whispered. "No, that's not." They led her outside as the cruiser lights flared brighter against the wet azaleas. She stumbled once, twisting toward me, shouting words I'll never forget. "You did this. You set me up." I stood in the doorway, rain curling the edges of my sleeves, unable to breathe. Across the street, a man leaned against a dark sedan, hands in pockets, watching. Declan. He didn't move, didn't speak, just watched as they took my daughter away. They kept her overnight. I sat in the waiting area of the county station, hands clasped so tightly my knuckles ached. Each time a door opened, I expected someone to tell me it had all been a mistake. Instead, I heard Tamsin's voice echoing down the hallway, raw, hoarse, furious. When they finally brought her out, her wrists were red from the cuffs. "You set me up," she hissed, low but sharp enough to cut through the hum of fluorescent lights. "You called them, didn't you? You wanted me gone." I started to speak, but the officer at her shoulder moved her along. I saw her eyes green, burning, full of the same fear she used to have before a thunderstorm. At the front desk, a woman with a stack of folders introduced herself. "Maria Kincaid, public defender. Your daughter's being charged with possession and false identification." Her tone was calm, matter of fact, not unkind. "I'll need someone to handle bail and contact information. Are you family?" I nodded, barely. "She's lucky it's county, not federal." Mireya continued. "If it's her first offense, we might work a conditional release." I signed the paperwork with a hand that didn't feel like mine. The numbers blurred on the page. $12,000 bond, collateral required. I withdrew the money from the account meant for my Austin trip, the one tied to the solar contract. While I waited, a deputy approached, tall and broad-shouldered, his badge polished but worn at the edges. "Mrs. Muir," he said quietly. "Name's Rowan Pike. Don't mention anything about that suitcase to anyone unless your lawyer's present. I can't explain why right now, but take my word you'll thank me later." He held my gaze until I nodded. Then he walked away, leaving a faint smell of rain and leather behind him. By evening, Tamsin was released. She wouldn't meet my eyes. In the car, she stared out the window, jaw clenched. Halfway home, she said, "You think I'm trash, don't you?" "Always have." My throat closed. "I don't. I managed. I never have." But the words felt weak, like paper against fire. She turned away, arms crossed. "Then why are you looking at me like that?" I didn't answer, because I didn't know if I was looking at my daughter or the ruin I'd helped create. The morning after Tamsin's release, the house felt smaller, like the walls had learned how to listen. Every creak of the floorboards sounded like a question I couldn't answer. She was still asleep upstairs, her door closed, the same way she'd shut it when she was a teenager after an argument. I told myself I'd let her rest. Truth was, I couldn't face her eyes again. Instead, I drove downtown to the county property office. The sky hung low and gray, a watercolor about to bleed. My trip to Austin was still postponed. The lease contract waited in an unsigned folder on my desk. I told the clerk I needed to update a record on the land title. He typed, frowning slightly. "Says here there's a lien filed 6 weeks ago, Declan Voss." The name dropped into my stomach like a stone. "What kind of lien?" I asked. "Private investment collateral. Filed, but not finalized," he said. "Usually tied to a loan. Might have been a scam. When I left, the air felt too thin. I called Maria from the car. She answered on the second ring. "I was just about to call you," she said. "Mrs. Muir, your daughter's case, it's not random. The package tested positive for controlled substances. There's also a pattern of fake IDs circulating under the name Declan Voss. He's on the state watch list for identity theft and courier operations." My hand tightened on the steering wheel until the leather creaked. Maria's voice softened. "Don't confront him. Let the authorities handle it." That night, sleep wouldn't come. I sat by the window, counting the rain against the glass the way I once measured flood levels, 1 drop, 2, 3, until the rhythm blurred. I used to believe that if I measured enough, if I stayed vigilant, I could prevent the water from rising, but it always did. When my husband died in that car crash outside Knoxville, Tamsin was 16. I remember her sitting on the porch steps, her knees drawn to her chest, whispering, "Don't let them take you too." I promised her I wouldn't. I promised I'd always fix what broke. Now, as the wind rattled the gutters, I felt my pulse skip, sharp and erratic. My hands trembled on the armrest, a betraying echo of that old vow. Somewhere upstairs, a floorboard creaked her footsteps or memory. I couldn't tell which. Maria's office smelled faintly of paper and peppermint. A soft hum from the fluorescent lights filled the silence as I waited. Hands folded over my purse. Tamsin sat across from me, arms crossed, jaw tight, eyes fixed on a crack in the wall. Maria leaned forward, her voice calm but edged with fatigue. "Here's the best option. If Tamsin agrees to a treatment program, I can negotiate for deferred prosecution, no record, if she completes rehab and community service. Mrs. Muir is willing to fund the program and your living expenses until you're stable." Tamsin didn't move. Her foot tapped once, then stilled. "I don't need rehab," she said. "You make it sound like I'm some junkie." I tried to keep my tone steady. "It's not about labels, sweetheart. It's about help, help." She laughed, brittle and small. "You mean control?" Her phone buzzed, and she flinched. I caught the name lighting up the screen before she turned it over. "Declan." Maria exhaled through her nose. "Tamsin, if you keep contact with anyone tied to this case, it could end badly. Please listen to your mother." But my daughter's face had already closed. "He believes me," she muttered. "You two don't." By afternoon, the argument had drained me. I stopped by the sheriff's office on my way home. Rowan Pike was at the counter, sorting reports. When he looked up, I saw the quiet steadiness in his expression, like someone who'd seen too many families fall apart and still showed up anyway. I need to file a temporary protective order, I said. He didn't ask against whom, just nodded, pulled a form, and slid it across the desk. You're doing the right thing, Mrs. Muir. It's not punishment. It's distance. Sometimes that's the only way to breathe. That night, I sat by the front window, cup of chamomile cooling in my hands. The porch light cast a faint circle across the yard. Beyond it, the road shimmered from rain, and in that shine I saw the slow flash of headlights, Declan's car idling by the mailbox, the same silver sedan from that morning. My heart stuttered once, hard, then steadied. I stood, locked every door, and drew the curtains tight. For the first time in weeks, I didn't feel like running. I felt the line between fear and resolve settle into place, and this time, I stayed behind it. The morning was pale and windless. I was trimming the rosemary by the porch when I heard the crunch of tires on gravel. Declan's silver sedan pulled up to the gate as if it still belonged there. He stepped out, smiling that narrow, practiced smile, the kind that hid a blade behind its teeth. Morning, Mrs. Muir, he called, closing the car door with a sharp click. We should talk. I didn't move. There's nothing left to talk about. He walked closer, stopping just short of the fence line. His coat was too thin for March. Rain still darkening the cuffs. You filed that order. Bad idea. You're making this worse for Tamsin. She's already in trouble because of you. Because of me. He laughed. Low and smooth. I gave her a way out. You took it from her just like you take everything. You want to play hero. But we both know you can't afford enemies right now. Withdraw the statement, or you'll lose more than your precious contract. For a heartbeat, fear flickered through me, old and familiar. But it died quickly. I straightened, the pruning shears still in my hand. This land isn't yours to poison, I said quietly, and neither is she. He took another step, voice tightening. You think your name still means something in this town? People forget. Money moves faster than truth. Before I could answer, the rumble of another engine broke the stillness. A sheriff's SUV turned up the drive. Rowan stepped out, one hand resting near his belt. Mr. Voss, he said evenly, you're under arrest. Warrant issued out of Virginia for interstate fraud and trafficking. Declan froze, color draining from his face. You can't. Rowan's voice stayed calm. We can. The cuffs clicked shut with a sound that cut through the morning like metal against glass. Tamsin had come out onto the porch without me noticing. She stood barefoot, her robe drawn tight, eyes wide as the man she'd defended was led away. When their car disappeared down the hill, she sank to the steps, hands trembling in her lap. I watched from the gate but didn't move toward her. The distance between us wasn't punishment anymore. It was mercy in its truest shape, space enough for her to see what I finally had. Austin smelled of dust and cedar when I stepped out of the cab. The sky was sharp and white, the kind of heat that makes the horizon shimmer. I hadn't been on a business trip in more than a decade, but the rhythm came back quickly, the file under my arm, the measured stride, the quiet rehearsing of facts before a meeting that could change everything. The law office overlooked the river, a stretch of glass and steel rising from limestone. Inside, the conference room hummed with air conditioning and polite smiles. The representative from Solara Energy handed me a pen, heavy enough to remind me what it was worth. Whenever you're ready, Mrs. Muir, he said. I looked down at the contract, 3 neat columns of figures. The sum that had started all of this. My reflection shimmered faintly on the polished table. I thought of Tamsin on the porch steps, her eyes red but clear at last, and of my husband's steady hands tracing the property lines all those years ago. Before I sign, I said, I need a few modifications. Mireya, seated beside me, raised an eyebrow but said nothing. Rowan stood near the door, quiet as always. Together, they listened as I outlined the trust structure: 1/3 for local environmental research grants, 1/3 for my own living expenses, 1/3 held in escrow for Tamsin, to be released only after verified sobriety, restitution, and therapy over 18 months. Maria noted every condition, her pen moving steadily across the page. When she finished, she slid the amendment toward the company lawyer. "She's prepared and fully aware of the terms," she said. He nodded. Impressed or cautious, I couldn't tell which. "It's unconventional," he murmured, "but lawful." The pen felt cool against my fingers. I signed once for the company, once for the trust, and once beside my husband's old signature from the deed archive they'd attached for record. My name joined his. Not in grief this time, but in continuity. When it was done, I realized my hands weren't trembling. The quiet that followed wasn't empty, it was clean, like the air after rain. I looked out at the river beyond the window, light glancing off the water, and felt the balance I'd been chasing for years finally settle into place. Autumn came softly that year, the kind of season that didn't need to announce itself. The air thinned. The trees on the ridge behind the house turned slow gold, and the sound of insects faded into something like peace. The letter arrived on a Tuesday, folded neatly inside a plain white envelope. The return address read, Cedar Creek Recovery Center, Charlottesville, Virginia. I sat at the kitchen table before opening it, tracing the edge of the paper as if it might disappear if I hurried. Her handwriting was smaller now, careful, deliberate. "Mom, I know I said awful things. I've been learning what silence can mean, how it can protect, and how it can hurt. Thank you for finally saying no. It's the first time I've understood what love costs." She wrote about early mornings spent cleaning the center's garden, about learning to cook without measuring, about group sessions that left her drained but honest. She didn't ask for forgiveness. She just hoped I was well. When I finished reading, the paper felt warm in my hands. I set it beside my tea, the steam curling like the ghost of breath. That night, Rowan called to tell me Declan had been sentenced 6 years. Interstate fraud and trafficking. I thanked him, though the words felt unnecessary. Justice had already settled quietly, the way snow finds a field and makes it new. The next morning, I climbed the porch steps with a new bulb in hand, a solar LED, bright and efficient. The old one had burned out weeks ago, but I'd waited for the right day to change it. As I twisted it into place, the light flickered once, then steadied. I sat down with my cup of tea, the air cool against my face. From where I sat, I could see the gravel of the driveway stretch into dusk, the mountains rising beyond it, and that single light casting a calm circle on the porch floor. "After all these years," I murmured, I finally measured the right flood. The crickets began their low hum, steady as a heartbeat, and the house settled into its new rhythm, quiet, lit, and entirely alive.